Center.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I'm always proud to rise in this House to speak on behalf of the good people of Toronto Centre. And I want to just bring all members in this House back to 2015, when Ontario lost 3 women to preventable gender-based violence. They were murdered in the Renfrew County. Their names we should never forget. I will speak them into the Chamber's record. Anastasia Kuzik, Natalie Warmerdon, and Carol Cullington were victims of intimate partner violence. A partner, a man with a demonstrated history of abuse and violence. And after 7 long years in 2022, the jury at the historic Renfrew inquest issued 86 recommendations. And those recommendations were targeting the systemic roots of intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, family violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking, all in its definitions. While the recommendations were aimed at various public bodies, 68 out of 86 of those recommendations fall directly onto the feet and on the desks of the provincial government. And although the government had the opportunity to take action in 2022 after receiving the report, they chose not to. And the number one declaration the number one recommendation that's been asked of this inquest, the citizen inquest, that has been mentioned many times, is to call on this government to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Right. A call that has now been echoed by 106 municipalities, 150 Ontario-based organizations, as well as multiple police chiefs, as well as police organizations in our province. Something that should have happened very quickly, and yet it took so long, Speaker. And tragically, now we've seen other provinces move into the positions of leadership where Ontario should have been, because they're commenting on something that happened in Ontario, and even though the provincial government was slow to act. I moved a motion on behalf of the official opposition. I tabled a bill, Bill 173, to specifically draw out the first recommendation of the Renfrew inquest to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. I didn't table all 86 at that point in time. I tabled just the first one. I thought it was simple enough and elegant enough that we could bring this House together, so we can demonstrate to Ontarians and to Ontarian women and girls that we were listening, that we were leaning in. But instead, the government sent that report, that bill rather, to committee, where it languished until the House rose and we had the snap winter election. But instead, the government called for a review and a study of IPV, something that no one in Ontario was calling for, because there have been numerous studies, research papers, as well as commissions and white papers done before. Those reports languish, Speaker, on the desks of all government members. And I know certainly the people who participate in the development of those reports are dismayed and disappointed that action hasn't taken. Because as we know, Speaker, when action is delayed, something as predictable as intimate partner violence can happen again. And so, Speaker, I'm thinking about what then transpired this morning in this House, where the government had an opportunity to once again show Ontarians that they were listening to all the various stakeholders that were calling for intimate partner violence to be declared an epidemic. And instead, the government chose to not listen and to call it something else. And I want to just highlight, Speaker, that, words do matter. And the declaration that could have been agreed upon this morning was the 5th opportunity that the government refused on behalf of the opposition to make that declaration on behalf of the people and the survivors that brought this word forward. And the word endemic that the government is now using is not what the stakeholders and the survivors have been calling for. They're calling for this government to call it as an epidemic, to track the information, to recognize that it is preventable, and understand that resources need to be put forward to it. I had asked government members at the time when the committee was asked to study IPV once again, why are you folks not declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic? A simple and elegant gesture to so many in Ontario. And I was told, Speaker, I was told by government members in private conversation, to be quite honest, is that the government didn't want to give the opposition a win. I was also told,
seems about right.
I was also told that they couldn't, that they felt that if they declared it an epidemic, then that they would have to spend money to address the systemic and structural issues.
The floor, I cannot hear the member present.
that they would have to spend the money and the resources to address the structural and systemic failures in the system when we know that intimate partner violence is preventable. And so, Speaker, of course it makes sense that the government for the 5th time would refuse the declaration because they've been consistent every single time. And I want to be clear, Speaker, that, you know, it is a carefully chosen word on behalf of the inquest, from the Renfrew inquest. It's a carefully chosen word by legal scholars. It's a carefully chosen word by survivors and stakeholders, and it's a carefully chosen word and phrase that was repeatedly asked upon the committee to adopt as soon as possible. So should the report come out without that simple declaration, you're telling us that you're not serious, despite good intentions from the member from Kitchener South Hespeler, who I have a lot of respect for. I have been working so hard at this committee because I knew that we had to do something. And so we called upon witnesses. Over 90 witnesses appeared at our committee. We spent the entire summer. I want to thank those committee members at the Standing Committee for Justice Policy for spending that summer with us, with me. And I learned a lot as survivors came forward to talk about what really mattered to them. And, you know, they will be able to confirm, and I know that the submissions are there because they're a matter of public record, is that they were calling on this government to do more and to do urgently. They were also saying that the government didn't need to study the issue once again. So I want to be able to highlight that, you know, this government needs to explain to survivors a couple of things. And I say this with all the sincerity in my heart, is that why would you not, to this day, on the eve that you're calling for the report to be drafted by a single government member as opposed to the non-partisan professional legislative staff, why on the eve of this would you not declare intimate partner violence once again?
This makes no sense. No answer.
But instead, we hear the government doing something that they want and not something that the community wants,
exactly,
or the police chiefs wanted, or the Association of Municipalities wanted.
Exactly.
You know, this has been very difficult, Speaker, because the issue is very personal. And I think that, you know, the members who sat through the committee will recognize that many of the participants who came forward to tell us their stories, they did so with an element of trust. And I want to be clear, Speaker, that, you know, what is now happening is probably something that we need to explain for them. For those who don't follow the parliamentary procedures, they need to understand that what has been tabled by the government is highly irregular. Some may even describe it as a process that's compromised. You know, when I asked a clerk, just any clerk who works in this House, you know, how often is it that the government would table a draft report on behalf of a committee that sat through 90 witness deputations, where we had received over 100 submissions. And I can't find a single person who works in this House who is part of our professional, nonpartisan staff who can tell me that this hasn't been done before. And so, with all the best intentions, it is so irregular, Speaker, that we need to be able to explain to Ontarians that what is happening is not normal business.
That's right.
And that's why this motion is so perplexing, is that not only the government not give the deputants what they had asked for, they're now drawing upon a different conclusion. And this is not to take away from the work that the committee did. It's not. It's not to take away from the government member who is tasked with writing a report. It's really to talk about, you know, what happens in this chamber matters, and how we conduct ourselves matter to Ontarians when they expect us as parliamentarians to actually follow protocol. Because we know that committees are comprised of both government members, opposition members, independent members. And it's the committee's work, where oftentimes we've talked about the committee's work, to be a non-partisan space. We are supposed to do the people's work at that committee.
That's right.
And so that is what citizens of Ontario would expect. And Speaker, so what is happening is so bizarre and compromised that we have to name it for what it is. You know, I want to just say that it's incumbent on all of us to think this through. How is it that a government member is being directed here to write a report on behalf of a committee? And then that report will be tabled in camera. And then we're all going to go into this room back again for the next 4 days to go through a line-by-line review. And then we were going to come out on the other side as a committee to say this is our committee's report in a government-dominated committee where the government has submitted a report. It's not the committee's report. It would be the government's report. And if anybody who has sat on this side of the aisle, you will know it's very hard to get any amendments passed in a government-controlled committee.
Never happened.
Everybody knows this. You've all worked so hard to draft these motions and these amendments. Every single one of us go in there wanting to do the work to improve the outcome, and every single time the government votes it down, even when they're really good ideas, because it didn't come from their side of the aisle. And Speaker, I don't think that that is going to serve those survivors, those advocates, those legal advocates, those gender-based violence groups, everybody who came before us and said, this is what we need to address the problem. And it is so critically important, and I want to highlight this point, is that even as a committee member, because I think that there were some remarks made that everybody on the committee agreed to everything that happened on the committee, I will say that that is categorically not true. On multiple occasions, I questioned things that happened in the committee. And on multiple occasions, I was outvoted. This is not in camera, so don't worry. But it was true. Asking things of the committee and then being told it doesn't work that way. So there is the perception that we all were there working together, but clearly, as this outcome is unfolding before Ontarians today, it's not that true. And so, Speaker, I want to be absolutely truthful because we owe it to Ontarians. They expect this Parliament to behave in a way that is parliamentarian. That's right. And so I am so concerned that this now sets a precedent for how committees will operate and the type of reports that will come out of it. What does to stop this government to directing itself to write every single committee report moving forward?
Nothing.
I would like to know. How can we be assured that this is not going to set a whole new standard? Because we know that the government has amended the standing orders, dozens of times since I've been here, Speaker, and every single year there's new changes. The government has been bypassing committee for very important legislation and bills that everybody really cares about, whether it's, Bill 60, or perhaps Bill 33. This constantly keeps happening, and as the rules change, Speaker, I think it's so critically it's incumbent on us to flag it. So this is why we are standing up here to talk about the motion that this government has tabled, because nothing that has been tabled is regular.
No.
And so this is the only avenue I have, Speaker, to be able to talk about what has transpired. Because when we leave this chamber, right, we're going to go back to this committee, and a report is going to be tabled by the government. And those who don't watch the proceedings of this House very carefully, or the committee proceedings, will think that that's normal. So anyone and everyone who's watching, please know that nothing that the government has done today is conventional.
That's right.
It's absolutely not. And while we move forward to address an issue that requires a whole of government approach, this report is going to set forward some architecture, right? It's going to set forward a foundation that will then influence government programs, services, policies, and funding. And we would not have the professional staff hired and employed by the legislature to carry out the research to write this report, recognizing that the recommendations that came from the individuals that came before us are going to be properly vetted. This is the problem, Speaker, is that if the government doesn't want to be embarrassed but that might be things that were said by witnesses that came before us. And things were said, Speaker, things were said that would be embarrassing to the government. Things were said by witnesses about government failure and the systems that needed to be changed. Things were said by witnesses, Speaker, about the chronic underfunding when it comes to victim services, around the failures around the courts, around what happens when we don't have adequate housing, transit, counseling. Things were said, and they were not showing the government in positive light. So, Speaker, what happens if the report is perhaps written a way that protects the government?
Right.
And when the government is in charge of the entire process, Speaker, how are we going to get to structural change and systemic change? Because after all, Speaker, they're the ones in charge.
That's right.
And if they tell you there's nothing to see and just keep on going, they do that. And the report could be set up in a way that they fund who they want to fund. We've seen that in the Social Development Fund, who they want to fund, not based on evaluation criteria or perhaps needs. And this is, again, not taking anything away from the member from Kitchener-South Hepler. But this is about setting the foundation for what happens next. And if you aren't concerned, Speaker, you know, then we don't have any hope left.
That's right.
Like, this is why we work in committee. This is why we have a relationship in committee where we really have sidebar conversations and talk about how do we fix the problem. And I've heard from members who have sat through different committees and members who are far more experienced than I, Speaker, far more experienced than I in this House, who have said to me, Kristen, committee work is some of the most important work that you will do. Not question period, but committee work. And that it's committee work that will produce the changes in the policies and the direction of the government that can actually improve people's lives. I've heard government members tell me, pay attention to committee. It's where the real work gets done. And so, to my surprise, Speaker, absolute flabbergast of why would we do something so different? Why would we compromise a process that has worked for this House for over 100 years?
Yes.
Why on earth, Speaker, would we agree to having French language speakers receive a report months later than English speakers in Ontario? Why on earth are we going in camera to deliberate over a government-produced report that is probably designed to protect the reputation of the government, that is going to reinforce the vision and the values of a government that has already refused intimate partner violence at least 5 times in this House, that has been chronically funding underserviced services in Ontario, that has left women and girls absolutely crying for justice.
Yes.
We cannot accept this, Speaker. We cannot. You know, I have a little boy who's six years old, and I think about the man that he's going to grow up to be. And I think about what it means for us to change the education system to ensure that he is going to understand what consent is, how he's going to have healthy relationships as he matures and grows. And I wonder if we're not looking at a whole of government change to the healthcare system, the justice system, and all the other systems and services that government is expected to produce and provide for the citizens. I wonder whether my little boy is going to be helped by this report. Because, Speaker, it matters, because we know that violence takes place in homes, and we know, Speaker, that little boys, little girls, women, gender diverse people, they are affected by violence. We owe it to them, Speaker, to get this right, and we owe it to them to make sure that this motion does not pass. Thank you.
For the debate, I recognize the member from Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Thank you, Speaker. And I will be splitting my time today with the member from Canada Carleton. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this government motion. I understand that